I don't know what case you are working on these days, but I can guarantee you that there is a slew of private investigators out west, particularly in New Mexico and in California, who are real busy working for some lawyers who have got to be salivating. Have you guessed the topic yet? You got it. Alec Baldwin and a bunch of other clueless idiots playing dangerous games with guns out in the desert. I got a lot to say about this, obviously, but let's start with the announcer lady. Go for it, darling.
Welcome to Nothing But the Truth, the podcast about investigations and how you can become a better detective. This is the no BS, no Hollywood nonsense real deal. Now here's your host, Detective Ram.
Did I sound a little pissed off during the intro? Yeah, if you heard that, then yeah, I think you might have heard right. Ramesh Nyberg here, your host of Nothing But the Truth, the podcast that makes investigations better by helping you become a better investigator. And oh my goodness, what a scene out there in the desert, and what a case the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office in New Mexico is handling. And there's a swarm of people that are involved in this. Of course, the civil lawyers are all over it. For the victim's family, her name is Halyna Hutchins, cinematographer, out there just doing her thing while this crew is making a movie called Rust, starring Alec Baldwin. And I'm sure you know all the facts by now, so I won't go into all the meticulous detail. But what is important is that a firearm, a loaded firearm with live ammunition, we're going to talk about that in a minute. A loaded firearm is handed to a guy named David Halls, who is apparently the assistant director or one of the assistant directors of this film. It's handed to him by someone called an armorer, who is apparently in charge of guns or whatever firearms are to be used in the movie. She hands it to David Halls, who in turn hands it to the actor Alec Baldwin so that he can practice drawing the weapon out of a holster, from what I understand, during the scene that they're about to shoot. None of these three people bother to check the weapon to see if it has a live round in it. That's the initial information that we got. Everybody at this point, on November 1st is when I'm recording this, has pretty much shut down, lawyered up, which is to be expected. Halls is the only one to have publicly said, I did not check the weapon. Good for you, David. Thanks for falling on your sword, and the first one to toss yourself on the funeral pyre, maybe the only one. Now, David Halls hands the weapon to Baldwin, who starts to practice with the weapon, and at some point depresses the trigger. The weapon discharges. Halyna Hutchins is struck by a live projectile and dies. Another assistant director in the vicinity is also wounded. So I don't know how many times the weapon is fired, or whether perhaps the projectile may have fragmented, or what is the case, because a projectile was recovered from Hutchins' body during autopsy. I know that some of you that are listening to this are like me. You have a background either in law enforcement or military, or perhaps you are just someone who likes firearms and you've got a firearms license in your state and you know a little bit about shooting. And what's the first thing they teach you? Everyone, come on, all together now. Safe handling of the firearm. Nobody goes on the range. Nobody gets to put live rounds in the weapon until you can show your firearms instructor that you know how to handle the weapon safely and how to hand it from one person to another. I remember when I was in the police academy, we didn't use live ammunition for, I think, the first 2 days. All we did was dry fire. And, by the time we finally got live ammo in, we were itching to get out there and get going with that. We didn't use dummy rounds or anything like that. It was strictly dry fire. And the first day, I would say half of the first day, was nothing but safe handling of the weapon. Always being aware of the status of your firearm. I can hear my firearms instructor growling at us now. He was an ex-Marine Corps drill sergeant. Always know the status of your weapon. If we heard that once a day, we heard it 5 times at least. And so this is what is so infuriating about this situation with this movie and the death of this woman, this promising cinematographer, is that you've got a bunch of adults out there, people who have been in the movie-making business, people who have presumably had firearms on their set before. And now it makes you wonder, was there ever any training in the safe handling of firearms? I would have to say no. And this is where we come in the PI industry. You know that these private investigators that are being hired by these civil attorneys are saying, find out everything you can about safe handling. Interview everybody and anybody who was ever around that movie set. And I want to know detailed questions about what they were told and how they were taught to handle firearms. I think they're going to come up completely empty-handed in that department. And I think the liability is absolutely astronomical in this case. Now, I'm not the civil lawyer, but you've sat in offices across from civil attorneys. They've told you about the duty to protect. And when you have a situation where you've got a whole bunch of people there, people that hold the mics and the boom mics and the gaffers, and like I said, I don't know anything about making movies, but I do know about firearms, and I do know about how to handle a firearm safely, and most of you do too. You can't tell me that they went through any kind of training on how to safely handle a firearm if 3 people handled that pistol and it ended up killing somebody. 3 people, from the armorer, whose name was Hannah Diaz something, to David Halls, the assistant director, who admitted not opening it and checking it, to Alec Baldwin, who ultimately fired the fatal shot. It's appalling. It's unconscionable that this could happen. This was a freaking movie. We're playing pretend out in the desert, and a woman is killed. I saw a New York Post article today that said, it quoted some firearms expert that said Alec Baldwin ignored the first rule of firearm safety. No kidding. Baldwin wasn't the only one. All of them did. All of them did. And that's what's so tragic about this situation. In that chain of custody, from the armorer to David Halls to Alec Baldwin, one person could have prevented this. Now, the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office in New Mexico, Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, is the agency that is investigating this from the criminal standpoint. I don't know what kind of state statutes they have regarding negligence and manslaughter, but here in Florida, this is bordering on a manslaughter charge. I'm not a prosecutor, but I've sat in the room with prosecutors for thousands of hours talking about death cases, and you've got a pretty decent manslaughter charge here on someone, maybe more than one person. Negligence of the highest degree with a firearm that ends up killing an innocent person. Heck, in Florida, you leave a firearm laying around your house and a toddler picks it up and kills somebody, you're going to jail for manslaughter. This scenario, in a way, is much worse, much more egregious, because you have more than one adult handling the weapon, passing it to one another, and you still have somebody getting killed. So this Hannah lady, the armorer, makes a statement to the news media, and in part of this statement she says, there are no live rounds on the set, or something to that effect. There is no live ammo on the set. Well, the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office did a search warrant on the set, and they found dozens, if not hundreds, of live and dummy rounds on the set. So what is going on there? It's either gross, massive incompetence, or it's a monstrous lie. Either way, the culpability, the liability cannot be ignored. The other interesting part about this story is that there seems to be a culture of either incompetence, ignorance, or just willful mistreatment of safety procedures and a disregard for the well-being of the people on the movie set. I believe it was a couple of days before this shooting, several of the workers there, again, whether they were people that do audio or people that set up scenes or whatever it was, it doesn't matter. Crew members walked off the set because of extreme heat, because of some sort of long working conditions. It doesn't really matter. What matters is there was an ongoing, well-known problem in the very basic safety and well-being needs of the people that were working there. Now, in the backdrop of that atmosphere, you have incompetent gun handling. You have negligent handling of a loaded weapon. And so let me jump back to what I said before about live rounds. I said I would address this. Someone explained to me why you have live rounds on a movie set. For what purpose? I mean, dummy rounds, blank rounds have been around forever. I believe there was another news article where they interviewed a director who said something to the effect of, in this day and age with our technology, our ability to create visuals and graphics, computer generated, there's no need for live ammunition. There's no need for that. We can create very persuasive imagery of someone firing a gun just with our technological ability. So there's problem number one, guys. There's question number one. How do you justify having live rounds on a movie set? How do you justify one of those live rounds getting inside a firearm that an actor is going to use while he's quick drawing or whatever he's doing, and he's drawing in the direction of a woman standing there? The mere fact that he did not do this downrange, he's out in a goddamn desert. I'm sure there was any points of the compass he could have turned and faced just empty sand and sand dunes and cactuses and drawn in that direction. But instead, he drew the weapon in the direction of a live human being. The civil liability is just through the stratosphere here. If I walk into a Target and slip on a wet floor and injure myself, Target is liable. Pure and simple, black and white. There is no ambiguity about this. Whether they spilled it or whether a customer spilled it, they're responsible for it. This situation seems like a slam dunk to me. I'm more than willing to listen to your side. I'm willing to listen to anybody who can explain it otherwise or has an opposing point of view. My guess is that things in the movie industry are going to change drastically, as well they should, because we don't know how many of these incidents have happened. It might have been near misses or situations that could have gone as badly as this one. So there does need to be some awareness here as a result. And of course, it's too late for poor Halyna Hutchins. Hey, more BS came out the very next day. I'm adding this on November 2nd, 2021. David Hall's attorney jumps up and says, my guy wasn't responsible. The assistant director, that's not his job to check weapons. Guess what, Mr. Attorney? I think you're going to go down in flames with that argument. I know you're trying to do damage control. David Hall's was the first one that I read about anyway that stood up and said, I didn't check the weapon. Well done, David. But his attorney, I'm sure, as I said before, is pulling his hair out and is now trying to do some backpedaling, some damage control. In my humble opinion, and my opinion is anything but humble, especially on this episode, if you're handling a firearm, yes, it is your job to check the firearm. I don't care if you're the assistant director. I don't care if you're the water boy. Your job is to check the firearm. And if you don't, that means you've never been trained. Okay? And that just goes to the entire organization. Rack them all up on the defendant list and let's go. So let me get off my soapbox now before I start saying stupid things like defund the movie industry. Holy mackerel, is that one going to get me in trouble? So how can we relate all this to you and your business as a private investigator? What's on your lead sheet here? That sounds like Capital One. What's in your wallet? What's on your lead sheet? So you're sitting down with a civil attorney on a lawsuit type of case, personal injury, wrongful death type case. It's probably not going to be just like this shooting, but there could be facts and circumstances and levels of liability that are very similar. Be proactive. Here's what you want to tell these attorneys. This might be in the form of an email, it might be in a phone conversation, or it might be in a face-to-face conversation in their office. Hey, Mr. Attorney, great. I've looked over the facts you gave me. I'm ready to go. I looked over the questions you want me to ask and the people you want me to contact. How about this too? Why don't I go and seek out people who have worked with this director before? Let's talk to the union for the gaffers or the mic people or whatever the heck they're called, and talk to them about working conditions. Maybe they have been in unsafe conditions before. Maybe there have been atmospheres on the set that have been less than safe. Maybe there have been other situations with firearms that have made people uncomfortable, that have maybe had an accidental discharge, somebody pointing a gun in the wrong direction. Maybe, Mr. Attorney, I can dig up some really good patterns of behavior that will help you show that this is not a one-time thing. It's a culture of the way they do things. It's a repeated disregard for safety. It's a consistent and ongoing attitude of arrogance and disregard for safety. Man, I'm telling you, there's attorneys that'll jump over their desk and hug you because they're not used to hearing this kind of proactive suggestions from private investigators. So use this case as a little bit of a guide. Throwing that in there so it has some relevance to helping you become a better investigator and helping you secure more business and more referrals. Thanks for listening, guys. I look forward to hearing from you. truth@nybergpi.com. Please do pick up a copy of my book, The 10 Must-Haves to Be a Great Detective. It's on Amazon. I thank you so much for your listenership. I hope you'll be around next time when we come back for another episode of Nothing But the Truth. Take care, guys. Remember, always put your best foot forward. Always check your weapon and know the status of your weapon. And don't forget to work on your other foot.